Mark smirked, his confidence flickering back for a brief second. Let's just say, I'm not the only one who's been hiding things. You might own this company now, but trust me, there are secrets buried here that even you don't know about. The room fell into silence again, the weight of his words lingering in the air. Maya held his gaze, her mind already working through the possibilities. Mark was done, but had she just uncovered a bigger problem? As security led him away, a quiet unease settled in the pit of her stomach. She had won this battle, but was the real fight only just beginning? Maya watched as security led Mark out of the building, his words still hanging in the air. She didn't let them shake her, at least not on the outside. She had dealt with people like him before, men who thought their power was permanent, who believed they could manipulate their way out of anything. But the truth always came out in the end. The office remained silent for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then slowly, conversations started up again, quiet at first, then growing louder. Employees exchanged glances, some relieved, others still processing everything that had just happened. Maya turned to the team. I know today has been a lot, she said, her tone softer now. But this isn't just about getting rid of a bad manager. It's about building something better. A company where people are valued, not just used. A few nods, a murmur of agreement. The woman from sales stepped forward again, her voice hesitant but hopeful. So, what happens next? Maya smiled. We rebuild. Together. She could see the way those words landed, the way shoulders eased just a little. Change was always uncomfortable, but for the first time in a long time, there was something new in the air. Possibility. The HR employee approached her, holding the folder of complaints. There's a lot here, she admitted. Mark wasn't the only problem. There are systems in place that allowed him to get away with so much. Maya nodded, taking the folder. Then we fixed the system. The young man from customer service, the one who had spoken up earlier, let out a small chuckle. Honestly, I can't believe you let him fire you just to see how things really worked around here. Maya grinned. Sometimes the best way to understand a place is to walk through the front door like everyone else. A few employees laughed, the tension in the room finally breaking. The weight of the past was still there, but now so was something else, a fresh start. Maya took a deep breath, looking around at the company she now led. Mark's final words still lingered in her mind, but she wasn't afraid. Whatever secrets this company held, she would uncover them. One by one. For now, though, she had done what she came here to do. And this was only the beginning. The other employees remained silent, their eyes darting between the two. Some of them had been on the receiving end of Mark's harsh leadership before. Others had learned to stay out of his way. But no one had ever stood up to him like this. And now the woman he had dismissed without a second thought held all the power. Mark cleared his throat, forcing a strained smile. Listen, Maya, I think we got off on the wrong foot, he said, his tone suddenly lighter. Why don't we talk in my office and straighten this out? Maya raised an eyebrow. Your office, she repeated, her voice steady. She glanced at the door behind him. You mean my office. A ripple of suppressed laughter spread through the employees, but no one dared to actually laugh. Mark's face twitched, but he nodded quickly, trying to play along. Right. Of course. Your office. Let's just. Actually, Maya cut him off, folding her arms. I think it's better we have this conversation out here. Transparency is important in leadership, don't you think? Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. He was used to controlling the narrative, pulling people aside where no one else could hear. But now there was no hiding. Before he could speak, another voice cut in. I knew something was off, A woman from the sales department muttered under her breath. She looked at Maya with realization dawning in her eyes. That's why you were watching everything today. You weren't just another new hire. Maya nodded. I wanted to see this workplace for what it truly is. And from what I've witnessed, there are some serious issues that need to be addressed. Her gaze flicked back to Mark, starting with leadership. Mark shifted uncomfortably, but before he could respond, another employee, a younger man from customer service, spoke up. With all due respect, Maya, what happens now? That was the question on everyone's mind. What was Maya going to do with her new position of power? And more importantly, what was she going to do about Mark? The room felt heavier with each passing second. Everyone was waiting for Maya's response, but she didn't rush. She let the silence stretch, watching the uncertainty flicker across Mark's face. He wasn't used to feeling powerless, and it showed. Finally, she spoke. What happens now depends on a few things, she said, her voice calm but firm. One of them is you, Mark. Mark's jaw tightened, but he forced another strained smile. Look, I understand there may have been some misunderstandings today, he said, his tone suddenly dripping with fake sincerity. But I've always had the company's best interests at heart. If you give me the chance, I'd be happy to help you transition into your new role. Maya studied him for a moment, then tilted her head slightly. You mean the same way you helped me transition into my role earlier today? She asked. Mark's face darkened. He opened his mouth, but before he could find an excuse, another voice spoke up. She's right, the woman from sales said, stepping forward. This isn't the first time Mark has treated someone unfairly. She hesitated, glancing around before adding, I've seen people quit because of him. Good people. A murmur spread through the employees. A few nodded. Others looked down, avoiding eye contact, but their silence spoke volumes. Maya's expression didn't change, but inside she was taking note of everything. She had suspected that Mark's behavior wasn't just a one-time incident. Now she was getting confirmation. Mark's hands clenched at his sides. That's ridiculous, he snapped, his carefully composed mask slipping. I've been running this place for years. If I was such a problem, why is this company still standing? Maybe because the employees are carrying more weight than they should, Maya replied smoothly. Maybe because people put up with bad leadership when they feel like they don't have a choice. Mark's nostrils flared, but before he could argue, another employee spoke up, a young woman from HR. I actually have a folder full of complaints that were never addressed, she said hesitantly. A lot of them were about Mark. Mark whipped his head around, eyes narrowing. That's confidential, he snapped. The woman straightened her shoulders. Not anymore, she said firmly. Tension crackled in the air. Mark looked around, realizing the control he once had was slipping fast. Employees he had dismissed or intimidated before were now speaking up. He had always thought fear was his greatest tool, but at this moment it was turning against him. Maya let out a slow breath, then met Mark's gaze. It looks like we have a lot to discuss. Mark swallowed hard, but he already knew. This conversation wasn't going to end in his favor. Mark's breathing grew unsteady. He could feel a shift happening around him, the power slipping through his fingers. The employees who had once stayed silent, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He straightened his posture, forcing himself to regain control. All right, he said, his voice tight but steady. I see what's happening here. You're all turning on me because of one bad day. After everything I've done for this company. His gaze darted around the room, looking for support, but none came. Maya remained still, letting him grasp at straws. Then she spoke. It's not just about today, Mark, she said evenly. It's about a pattern of behavior. And from what I'm hearing, that pattern has been going on for a long time. Mark opened his mouth to protest, but before he could, the door to the office suddenly swung open. A man in a suit stepped inside, holding a thick folder in his hands. The employees turned, confused, as he walked straight toward Maya. "Excuse me, Miss Carter," he said, addressing her formally. "I have the financial records you requested." Maya took the folder and opened it without a word. Mark's eyes widened slightly. "Financial records," he echoed, his voice laced with unease. Maya nodded as she flipped through the pages. "I requested a full audit of the company before finalizing my purchase," she explained, scanning the numbers. At first, everything seemed to be in order, but then something caught my attention. She glanced up at the man. "Would you mind explaining?" The man adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "There are multiple irregularities in the company's accounts," he said, flipping to a page filled with numbers and highlighted sections. "Funds have been redirected, unauthorized expenses, inflated invoices, missing payments. All of it points to one person." The room went completely silent. Everyone knew what was coming before he even said it. "Mark." Mark's face drained of color. That's ridiculous." He sputtered, shaking his head. "I don't know what kind of mistake you've made, but I would never." Maya snapped the folder shut. "You were stealing from the company, weren't you, Mark?" The accusation hung in the air like a storm cloud, thick with electricity. The employees gasped, whispering among themselves. Some looked shocked. Others, not so much. Mark clenched his fists. "You can't prove that," he said through gritted teeth. Maya tilted her head slightly. "Can't I?" The man in the suit nodded. "We have records, bank statements, and discrepancies that all lead back to you. It's more than enough for a formal investigation." Mark took a step back, his mind racing. He had planned for a lot of things, but this was something he couldn't talk his way out of. His authority was gone, his reputation shattered, and now his job. His freedom. Maya stepped forward, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. "You tried to get rid of me today because you thought I was just another employee. But the truth is, Mark, the only person getting fired today is you." Mark's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had lost, and everyone knew it. Mark stood frozen, his face pale as Maya's words echoed through the room. The employees were still whispering, some in shock, others barely able to hide their satisfaction. The once untouchable manager was now completely exposed, but Maya wasn't done yet. She turned to the man in the suit. "I assume the legal team has already been informed." He nodded. "Yes. The evidence is solid. If you want to press charges, we can move forward immediately." Mark's breath hitched. "Wait, press charges." His voice was tight with panic. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is a misunderstanding. I've been with this company for years. You can't just throw me out like this." Maya's expression remained calm. "You fired me without a second thought earlier today," she reminded him. "You made a decision based on nothing but your own bias. And yet here you are, caught red-handed, begging for leniency." She let the words settle before adding, "Tell me, Mark, why should I show you the mercy you never showed others?" Mark had no answer. His mouth opened and closed, but the confidence, the arrogance, everything that had once made him feel untouchable, was gone. Maya turned to the employees, her voice carrying across the room. "I didn't come here today just to take over a company. I came to build something better, and that starts now." She glanced at the man in the suit. "Security will escort Mark out immediately." He no longer has any authority here. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. A wave of relief washed over the employees, many of whom had spent years enduring Mark's harsh leadership. As security stepped in, Mark's shoulders slumped. He knew there was no way out of this. But just as they reached for his arm, he let out a bitter laugh. "You think you've won?" he muttered, shaking his head. "You have no idea what you're walking into." Maya's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" It was her first day on the job, and she was excited to get started. Dressed professionally, resume in hand, Maya walked into the office, ready to prove herself. But she had no idea that her first day would be her last, at least in the role she was hired for. The moment she stepped into the building, eyes turned toward her. Some were welcoming, others indifferent, but one pair held something else: judgment. That pair belonged to Mark, the store manager. He was the type of boss who liked to be in control, and when he saw Maya, something about her rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe it was the confidence in her walk, or maybe it was just the fact that she was there at all. From the start, Mark made things difficult. He barely looked at her during introductions, brushed off her questions, and assigned her the most menial tasks. While other new hires were getting proper training, Maya was sent to the stockroom, lifting boxes that weren't even part of her job. But she kept her cool. She had dealt with worse before, and she wasn't going to let one difficult manager ruin her first day. Then things escalated. Mark started nitpicking everything she did. He scolded her for taking too long with a task, even though she had never been shown the right way to do it. When she tried to ask a coworker for guidance, he snapped, "Figure it out yourself." It was clear he didn't want her there. And then it happened. Just a few hours into her shift, Mark pulled her aside. "This isn't working out," he said coldly. "You're not a good fit for this company. You're fired." Just like that. No warning, no valid reason. Maya could feel the stares of her coworkers as she stood there, shocked. But instead of arguing, instead of begging for a second chance, she did something that no one expected. She reached into her bag, pulled out a set of documents, and calmly placed them on Mark's desk. He frowned, flipping through the pages. His face drained of color as he realized the truth. Maya wasn't just an employee. She was the new owner of the company. And in that moment, the power shifted. Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the documents. His eyes darted between the papers and Maya, disbelief written all over his face. The room was silent, every employee watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Maya stood tall, her expression calm, but there was no mistaking the power shift in the air. Mark swallowed hard, trying to compose himself. What is this?" he stammered, his usual confidence gone. Maya didn't answer right away. She let the weight of the moment settle in before speaking. "Those," she said, "are ownership documents. As of last week, I acquired this company. So when you fired me just now, you weren't firing an employee. You were firing your boss." A few employees exchanged glances, struggling to process what they had just heard. Some of them had worked under Mark for years, enduring his temper and arrogance, but never had they seen him speechless. He had always been the one in charge, the one with the final say. But now, in a matter of seconds, everything had changed. Mark let out a nervous chuckle, shaking his head. No, this must be a joke. He tried to keep his voice steady, but the beads of sweat forming on his forehead told another story. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Do I look like I'm joking?" she asked, her voice smooth, controlled. He looked down at the papers again, desperately searching for a way out, some kind of mistake. But there wasn't one. It was all official. The company he thought he ruled over was no longer his to control. Maya could see the panic in his eyes, but she wasn't done yet. She took a step closer, lowering her voice just enough to make him listen. You see, Mark, I like to observe before I make decisions. That's why I didn't announce myself when I walked in today. I wanted to see how things really worked here, how the employees were treated, how you, as a manager, handled your team. She paused, letting her words sink in. And what I saw was disappointing. Mark's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He knew better than to argue, not when he had just walked himself into the worst mistake of his career. The other employees, still in shock, stood frozen in place. Some looked at Mark, others at Maya, waiting, wondering what was going to happen next. Mark's mind raced as he tried to regain control of the situation. He had always been the one in charge, the one making decisions, but now the ground beneath him felt unsteady. He had just fired the owner of the company, without even realizing it. How could this be happening? Maya watched him, her expression unreadable. She could see the wheels turning in his head, the desperation in his eyes. But she wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily.